Jake Morrison had always prided himself on his ability to fix things that shouldn't be broken and ignore things that shouldn't be his problem. 23 years of maintenance engineering had taught him that atmospheric processors didn't care about your personal life. Gravity generators operated on their own schedule regardless of human convenience. And the best policy when encountering anything unusual in the diplomatic wing was to pretend you hadn't seen it and walk away very quickly. So when he rounded the corner into Corridor 7 Alpha and found a young woman with distinctly pointed ears being chased by 3 figures in elaborate armor that looked like it belonged in a museum, his first instinct was to check his chronometer. The annual Terran Cultural Festival wasn't for another 6 months, and even then, the costume parties usually stayed in the civilian sectors. The woman spotted him first. Her eyes, an unusual shade of violet that definitely wasn't available in any contact lens catalog, met his with an expression of pure desperation. "Please," she said, her voice carrying an oddly formal cadence that made each word sound like it had been carefully selected from a dictionary. "I require assistance in avoiding those individuals who pursue me with questionable intentions." Jake glanced at the pursuing guards, noting that their armor seemed to hum with its own power source, and their weapons looked functional rather than decorative. Either the station's costume budget had increased dramatically, or he was about to become involved in something that fell squarely into the not-his-problem category. "Look, miss," he started, hefting his toolkit, "I'm just here to fix the air recycler in Section C. Maybe you want security." "Security is precisely whom I wish to avoid," she replied, ducking as one of the guards raised what appeared to be some sort of energy weapon. "I assure you, I am not engaging in criminal activity. I am merely exercising my right to decline an arranged marriage to an individual whose personality closely resembles that of a malfunctioning food processor." Despite every instinct screaming at him to walk away, Jake found himself oddly charmed by her peculiar way of speaking. Also, the energy weapon thing was making him nervous. "Arranged marriage? What is this, the 18th century? I am unfamiliar with your dating system," she said, now crouched behind a maintenance panel. "But I suspect it involves significantly more personal choice than mine currently does." The guards were getting closer, their heavy boots creating an ominous rhythm against the metal flooring. Jake made the kind of split-second decision that had gotten him into trouble countless times before. "This way," he said, popping open an access panel to the ventilation system. "And try not to touch anything that glows." The woman looked at the narrow opening with the expression of someone who had never encountered a crawlspace before. "You wish me to enter that tunnel? Unless you prefer whatever those guys have in mind," Jake replied, already climbing into the duct. "Come on, it's perfectly safe, mostly." She followed him with surprising grace, though her running commentary suggested she found the experience somewhat bewildering. "This passage is remarkably narrow," she observed as they crawled through the metal tunnel. "Is this how humans typically travel when seeking to avoid detection?" "Only the smart ones," Jake replied, trying not to laugh. "What's your name, anyway?" "I am called Lyra," she said. "And you are?" "Jake Morrison, atmospheric maintenance specialist and apparently amateur escape artist." He paused at a junction, consulting a mental map of the station's infrastructure. "So who were those guys? Disgruntled wedding planners?" "They serve my mother," Lyra said simply. "She has certain expectations regarding my future which do not align with my personal preferences. Let me guess, she wants you to marry some guy with money, and you want to marry for love." There was a pause. "The concept of love is not entirely relevant to our matrimonial customs," Lyra said carefully. "The arrangement is more concerned with political alliance and genetic compatibility. However, I find the proposed partner to be insufferably pompous and prone to explaining things I already understand, which I consider grounds for refusing the union." Jake stopped crawling. "Wait, genetic compatibility? What exactly are you people, some kind of?" A loud clang echoed through the ventilation system, as one of the guards apparently decided to investigate the access panel they'd used. "Perhaps we could continue this discussion while maintaining our current trajectory," Lyra suggested politely. "Right." Jake resumed crawling, his mind racing. The pointed ears, the formal speech patterns, the references to genetic compatibility. Either he'd stumbled into the galaxy's most elaborate cosplay scenario, or his day had just gotten significantly more complicated. They emerged 20 minutes later in the maintenance bay of Section C, where Jake's atmospheric processor waited in patient malfunction. Lyra climbed out of the ventilation system with considerably more dignity than the situation warranted, brushing dust from her clothes, with the air of someone attending a minor social inconvenience, rather than fleeing pursuit. "Your infrastructure is quite ingenious," she observed, examining the processor with genuine interest. "This device maintains atmospheric composition throughout the station." "One of many," Jake replied, pulling out his tools. "You seem to know something about engineering." "Basic mechanical principles are universal," she said, then tilted her head as if listening to something. "Though your technology appears to operate on different assumptions than what I am accustomed to." Jake was about to ask what she meant when she reached toward the processor's control panel. "I wouldn't touch that if I were." She placed her palm against the interface, and every readout on the device immediately stabilized. The atmospheric processor, which had been stuttering through its cycles for 3 days, suddenly began humming with perfect efficiency. "How did you?" Jake stared at the readings in amazement. "That's impossible." This thing was completely out of calibration. Lyra withdrew her hand, looking slightly embarrassed. "I may have inadvertently interfered with your repair process. I apologize. Among my people, mechanical systems respond to bioelectric fields, and I sometimes forget that human technology operates differently." Jake stood very still, his toolkit forgotten in his hands. "Bioelectric fields." "Yes, it is quite standard. Surely your people possess similar capabilities." "We definitely don't," Jake said slowly. "Lyra, what exactly are your people?" Before she could answer, his communicator crackled to life. "All personnel be advised. Security sweep in progress for a missing individual from the diplomatic delegation. Approach with caution and report any contact immediately." Lyra's expression shifted to something that might have been resignation mixed with mild annoyance. "It appears my temporary respite from maternal authority has concluded." "Missing individual from the diplomatic delegation," Jake repeated. "Lyra, please tell me you're not." "I am not a criminal, if that is your concern," she said primly. "I am merely a daughter attempting to avoid a social obligation that will result in lifelong misery with a man who considers trade negotiations appropriate dinner conversation." Jake's communicator crackled again. "Individual is described as female, approximately 25 standard years, distinctive ears, formal speech patterns. Do not attempt to detain, repeat, do not attempt to detain." They looked at each other in silence for a moment. Finally, Jake sighed. "Your mother doesn't happen to be some kind of diplomat, does she?" "She prefers the title queen, actually," Lyra said with the tone of someone discussing mildly embarrassing relatives. "Though I suppose diplomat is not entirely inaccurate." Jake's quarters in the civilian sector had never felt particularly cramped until he tried to share them with someone who approached every piece of standard-issue furniture as if it might spontaneously combust. Lyra stood in the center of his modest living area, rotating slowly like a sensor array calibrating itself to unfamiliar surroundings. "Your dwelling maintains artificial gravity through rotational mechanics rather than graviton manipulation," she observed, testing the bounce in her step. "How delightfully primitive." "Thanks, I think," Jake muttered, sealing the door behind them. His hands were still shaking slightly from their sprint through the maintenance corridors, and he couldn't decide if it was from adrenaline or the growing certainty that he'd just smuggled alien royalty into his apartment. "Look, you should probably clean up. There's a shower through that door, and I've got some clothes that might." Lyra had already wandered over to his kitchenette and was examining his coffee maker with the intense focus of an archaeologist discovering a new civilization. "This device appears to heat liquid using thermal coils," she said, reaching toward it with obvious curiosity. "Don't touch that." Jake lunged forward, remembering what had happened to his atmospheric processor. "It's not designed for, bioelectric interaction." "Ah, yes, your technology requires manual operation," she said, pulling her hand back. "How do you manage to accomplish anything efficiently?" "We make up for it with caffeine and stubborn determination," Jake replied. "About that shower." "I am unfamiliar with this ritual," Lyra admitted. "Is it some form of liquid meditation?" Jake stared at her. "You've never taken a shower." "Our cleansing systems utilize sonic frequencies to remove contaminants," she explained. "The concept of standing beneath falling water seems both inefficient and potentially drowning-inducing." "It's not," Jake started, then decided this was not a conversation he was prepared to have. "Just turn the handle to the right, step under the water, and use the soap," The bottles are labeled. Lyra nodded solemnly, as if he'd just explained the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, and disappeared into the bathroom. Jake collapsed onto his couch and tried to process the last 2 hours of his life. He'd gone from fixing a simple atmospheric processor to harboring an alien princess who thought his coffee maker was a fascinating relic. The sound of running water was interrupted by a muffled exclamation of surprise, followed by what sounded suspiciously like Lyra having a conversation with the shower itself. "Why does the water fall from above like rain?" Her voice drifted through the door. "Is this meant to simulate weather? Are humans attempting to recreate outdoor conditions in an enclosed space?" "It's just a shower," Jake called back. "It's supposed to fall from above." "This seems unnecessarily complicated," she replied. "Could you not simply immerse yourself in a contained vessel of water?" "That's called a bath, and yes, we have those too." There was a pause. "Your species has multiple methods for the same cleaning procedure. How remarkably redundant." Jake was formulating a response when his computer chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and froze. The notification showed a news alert from the station's information network. "Diplomatic crisis brewing as Zephyrian princess goes missing." "Oh no," he whispered, clicking on the alert. The news report opened with footage of the diplomatic wing in chaos. Security personnel coordinating searches, while officials in elaborate robes gestured dramatically at each other. The reporter, a stern-faced woman Jake recognized from the morning briefings, spoke with the measured urgency reserved for genuinely important news. "The disappearance of Crown Princess Lyrale of the Zephyrian Consortium has thrown the Human-Zephyrian Alliance negotiations into uncertainty," she was saying. "Queen Celestara has expressed deep concern for her daughter's safety and has requested full cooperation from station security in the search effort." Jake's blood pressure spiked as the reporter continued. "The princess was last seen in the diplomatic wing approximately 4 hours ago, shortly before her scheduled betrothal ceremony to Prince Valdrin of the Centauri Trade Federation. Her absence has been described as unprecedented by Zephyrian officials, who note that Princess Lyrale has never before missed a formal obligation." The bathroom door opened, and Lyra emerged wearing one of Jake's old engineering jumpsuits, which somehow managed to look elegant on her despite being 3 sizes too large. Her long ears were still damp from the shower, and she'd rolled up the sleeves in a way that suggested she'd figured out human clothing through pure logical deduction. "The waterfalling experience was surprisingly pleasant," she announced. "Though I remain puzzled by your soap. It claimed to be mountain fresh, but I detected no mineral compounds typically associated with elevated terrain." Jake gestured helplessly at his computer screen. "Lyra, there's something you need to see." She approached the screen with interest, tilting her head as she processed the newscast. "Oh dear," she said mildly. "Mother appears to have noticed my absence." "Noticed your absence?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "They're calling it a diplomatic crisis. There are search parties. Your mother is the queen of the Zephyrian Consortium." "Technically, she prefers Supreme Coordinator," Lyra corrected. "Queen is merely the human translation. And yes, she does tend toward the dramatic when things don't proceed according to her carefully constructed schedules." Jake slumped back on his couch. "You're really her. You're actually alien royalty." "I prefer to think of myself as a temporarily displaced individual with strong opinions about arranged marriages," Lyra said, settling beside him with the cautious movements of someone still adjusting to human furniture. "Though I suppose alien royalty is technically accurate from your perspective." "This is insane," Jake muttered. "I'm harboring a fugitive princess whose disappearance might start an interstellar incident." "That seems unlikely," Lyra said thoughtfully. "Mother is certainly upset, but she's far too pragmatic to risk the alliance over my reluctance to marry someone whose idea of romantic conversation involves reciting trade agreements in alphabetical order." Jake was about to respond when Lyra suddenly straightened, her expression shifting to one of intense concentration. "Your communication device is receiving multiple electromagnetic signals," she said, looking toward his computer. "Approximately 17 different sources, all transmitting in rapid bursts." "That's just the network traffic," Jake started to explain, then stopped. "Wait, you can sense that?" "Of course, can you not?" Lyra looked genuinely puzzled. "The signals are quite obvious. They carry patterns of structured information, though your encoding methods are remarkably inefficient." She reached toward the computer and Jake grabbed her wrist, Don't. You'll crash the system like you did with the atmospheric processor. I was merely going to optimize the data flow, she said, sounding slightly offended. Your information networks operate at a fraction of their potential capacity due to processing bottlenecks and redundant error checking. Those redundant error checks keep the system stable, Jake explained. Human technology is designed to be reliable, not necessarily efficient. Lyra considered this. That explains why your coffee maker requires so many steps to produce heated bean water. Despite everything, Jake found himself laughing. It's called coffee, and those steps are important for flavor. Flavor optimization through ritualistic preparation, Lyra nodded seriously. Your species appears to value ceremony over efficiency in many areas, says the woman who ran away from a betrothal ceremony. That was different, she replied primly. Prince Valdrin's idea of ceremony involves 47 separate documents outlining the economic benefits of our union, followed by a formal exchange of genetic compatibility reports. Jake winced. That does sound pretty awful. The worst part is that he reads them aloud, Lyra continued. All 47 documents in chronological order, during what he refers to as romantic dinners. Okay, I take back every complaint I ever had about human dating, Jake said. That's genuinely horrible. Lyra smiled for the first time since he'd met her, and Jake was struck by how the expression transformed her entire face. I knew you would understand, she said. Your species may have inefficient technology, but at least you seem to grasp that marriage should involve some degree of mutual enjoyment. The computer chimed again. Jake woke up to the sound of someone having an animated conversation with his replicator. Based on the polite but increasingly frustrated tone, he could only assume Lyra was attempting to negotiate with the machine for breakfast. I assure you I am capable of consuming standard nutritional components, she was saying. Your refusal to provide sustenance seems unnecessarily obstinate. Jake stumbled into the kitchenette to find Lyra standing before the replicator with her hands on her hips, glaring at the device as if it had personally insulted her ancestry. You have to tell it what you want, he explained, running a hand through his hair. It doesn't read minds. How remarkably inefficient, she replied. Our food synthesis units analyze individual nutritional requirements and provide optimal sustenance automatically. Yeah, well, our machines like to be asked nicely. Jake punched in a request for coffee and toast, then glanced at Lyra. What do your people usually eat? Synthesized protein matrices with mineral supplements, calibrated to individual metabolic needs, she said, then paused thoughtfully. Though I confess, the aroma emanating from your heated bean water yesterday was quite appealing. Coffee it is, then? Jake programmed a second cup, then froze as his door chimed with an incoming visitor request. They both stared at the entrance panel, which was flashing with an official security override code. Princess Lyrale of the Zephyrian Consortium, came a crisp voice through the intercom. This is Commander Tors of Station Security. We know you're in there, and we need to speak with you immediately. Lyra sighed and straightened her borrowed jumpsuit. It appears my temporary anonymity has concluded. Wait, Jake grabbed her arm as she moved toward the door. We need to think about this. If they take you back, what happens? I resume my interrupted betrothal ceremony with Prince Valdrin, followed by a lengthy lecture from Mother about duty and diplomatic responsibility, she said matter-of-factly. Then I spend the remainder of my existence listening to trade negotiations and pretending to find economic forecasts romantically stimulating. The door chimed again, more insistently. Princess, we're aware of your concerns regarding the arranged marriage, but your mother has asked us to escort you safely back to the diplomatic wing. She's willing to discuss alternative arrangements. Jake's eyebrows shot up. Alternative arrangements. Mother is many things, but she's not unreasonable, Lyra admitted. If I can present her with a logical argument for postponing the betrothal, she might consider it. The challenge is that she defines logical rather strictly. What kind of logic are we talking about? Evidence that I can contribute more to the Zephyrian-human alliance through alternative means than through marriage to Prince Valdrin, she explained. Unfortunately, my qualifications are primarily theoretical rather than practical. The intercom crackled again. Princess, I'm authorized to inform you that Queen Celestara has agreed to hear your concerns, but only if you return voluntarily within the next hour. She's also requested to meet with Mr. Morrison. Jake's coffee cup slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. She wants to meet with me. That seems ominous, Lyra agreed cheerfully. Mother typically only requests meetings with individuals she plans to either recruit or eliminate. Eliminate, Jake's voice cracked. Metaphorically speaking in most cases, she assured him. Though her definition of eliminate can be quite creative. Commander Torres spoke again, his patience clearly wearing thin. Mr. Morrison, the Queen has expressed interest in your engineering expertise. Apparently, your maintenance work on the atmospheric processors caught the attention of our Zephyrian technical staff. Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully. That's actually quite promising. Mother respects practical competence above most other qualities. Practical competence at what? Jake demanded. I fix air recyclers and gravity generators. What could an alien queen possibly want with that? Our technology operates on principles that interface with bioelectric fields, Lyra explained. Most human engineering systems are incompatible with our methods, but yesterday you demonstrated an unusual aptitude for hybrid integration when you allowed me to assist with your atmospheric processor. I didn't allow you to do anything. You just grabbed it and made it work better. Exactly, she said, as if this explained everything. You adapted to an unexpected technological integration without panic or rejection of the new parameters. That's remarkably rare among your species. Jake was processing this information when the intercom delivered another announcement that made his blood pressure spike dramatically. Mr. Morrison, you should also be aware that harboring a diplomatic fugitive carries certain legal implications. But Queen Celestara has indicated she's more interested in discussing potential employment opportunities than pursuing charges. Employment opportunities, Jake repeated weakly. The Human Zephyrian Alliance requires technical specialists who can bridge our technological approaches, Lyra said, suddenly looking far more interested in the conversation. If Mother is considering recruiting you, it means she's recognized your potential value to the integration process. But I don't know anything about alien technology. You know about human technology, and you demonstrated yesterday that you can work with hybrid systems, she pointed out. That combination is extraordinarily valuable. The door chimed a third time, and Commander Tor's voice took on a note of official finality. Princess, Mr. Morrison, I need a response within the next 5 minutes, or I'll be forced to implement security protocols. Queen Celestara is waiting in Conference Room 7 with her technical advisors. Lyra looked at Jake with an expression that managed to combine hope, apology, and mild amusement. I realize this is considerably more complicated than you bargained for when you decided to assist me yesterday. That's putting it mildly, Jake muttered. Okay, let's say we go to this meeting. What exactly am I walking into? A room full of Zephyrians who will analyze your electromagnetic signature, evaluate your technical competence, and determine whether you represent a valuable asset or a potential security risk, she said matter-of-factly. And if they decide I'm a security risk, then you'll likely spend the next several years in comfortable detention while they decide what to do with you, she replied cheerfully. But I don't think that's likely. Mother mentioned employment opportunities, which suggests she's already decided you're useful. Jake stared at her. You have a really unusual definition of reassuring. I prefer to think of it as refreshingly honest, she said. Shall we go meet my mother? Do I have a choice? Of course you do, Lyra assured him. You can come willingly and potentially discover fascinating new career opportunities, or you can refuse and spend the remainder of your time on this station wondering what might have been while dodging increasingly persistent recruitment attempts. When you put it like that, Jake sighed and moved toward the door. What should I expect from your mother? She's brilliant, pragmatic, occasionally ruthless, and has very strong opinions about proper protocols, Lyra said, smoothing down her hair. Also, she'll probably want to know why you look like you slept in your clothes. Jake glanced down at his wrinkled jumpsuit and disheveled appearance. Should I change? There isn't time, she said, then paused thoughtfully. Though you should probably know that Mother can sense deception through electromagnetic field fluctuations. So I'd recommend avoiding any attempts to mislead her about your involvement in my escape. She can detect lies. Among other things, Lyra said, opening the door to reveal Commander Torres and 2 additional security officers. Hello, Commander. I trust Mother isn't too upset about the delay. Torres, a compact man with the bearing of someone accustomed to managing diplomatic crises, looked relieved to see her. Your Highness, the Queen has been quite patient, all things considered, Mr. Morrison, if you'd both come with us, please. As they walked through the corridors toward the diplomatic wing, Jake found himself studying Lyra's profile. You know, for someone who was desperately trying to avoid an arranged marriage yesterday, you seem pretty calm about facing your mother. Yesterday I was simply running away from a problem, she replied. Today I may have found a solution. What kind of solution? She smiled, and Jake was struck again by how the expression transformed her features. The kind that involves proving I can contribute more to the alliance as a technical liaison than as Prince Valdrin's wife. And how exactly do you plan to do that? By convincing Mother that you and I working together represent a more valuable asset than a traditional political marriage, she said simply. Conference Room 7 looked like someone had taken a standard diplomatic meeting space and redesigned it by committee with representatives from 3 different galaxies. Jake tried not to gawk at the crystalline displays that floated without visible support and the chairs that seemed to adjust themselves to each occupant's physiology. But his attention was immediately captured by the woman seated at the head of the table. Queen Celestara possessed the same pointed ears and violet eyes as her daughter. But where Lyra carried herself with youthful determination, the queen radiated the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of managing interstellar politics. She was currently engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with a man in elaborate robes who could only be Prince Valdrin. "Your Majesty," the prince was saying in a voice that managed to sound both pompous and whiny simultaneously. "Surely you cannot seriously consider postponing our union over a mere tantrum. The economic implications alone." "Prince Valdrin," Queen Celestara interrupted with the patient tone of someone who had reached the absolute limit of her patience approximately an hour ago. "Perhaps you could review the trade agreements in your quarters while I speak with my daughter and Mr. Morrison." It wasn't really a suggestion. Prince Valdrin opened his mouth to protest, took one look at the Queen's expression, and apparently decided that discretion was the better part of self-preservation. He gathered his robes with wounded dignity and swept from the room, but not before casting a reproachful look at Lyra that suggested he held her personally responsible for his humiliation. "Well," Queen Celestara said once the door had sealed behind him, "that was unpleasant. Lyrale, you look well. Mr. Morrison, please sit down before you fall down." Jake realized he'd been standing at attention like a recruit facing a general and hastily took the chair that helpfully adjusted itself to his height. "Your Majesty, I want to apologize for any." "Don't," she said simply. "Lyrale, I trust Mr. Morrison treated you with appropriate courtesy during your unauthorized adventure." "He was exemplary," Lyra replied formally, then grinned, though he did seem alarmed when I attempted to consume his oral hygiene products. "Toothpaste isn't food," Jake protested, then caught himself addressing alien royalty about dental care and felt his face flush. Queen Celestara's lips twitched with what might have been amusement. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you assisted my daughter in avoiding her betrothal ceremony yesterday." "Yes, Your Majesty, but I didn't know she was a member of the royal family attempting to flee an arranged marriage that would cement a crucial political alliance." The Queen finished mildly. "No, I suspect you didn't. What did you think you were doing?" Jake glanced at Lyra, who nodded encouragingly. "Honestly, I thought I was helping someone avoid getting married to a jerk." "An accurate assessment," Queen Celestara agreed. "Prince Valdrin is indeed a jerk, though he represents valuable trade connections with the Centauri Federation." Mother, Lyra looked scandalized. "What, he is?" the Queen replied matter-of-factly. "Unfortunately, jerks occasionally possess political utility. However, your little adventure has provided me with some interesting information." She touched a control surface, and the room's displays shifted to show technical readouts that made Jake's head spin. "Our monitoring systems recorded some unusual energy signatures in the maintenance sectors yesterday. Specifically, they detected successful hybrid integration between Zephyrian bioelectric manipulation and human technological systems." Jake felt his stomach drop. "You were watching us?" "Mr. Morrison, I am the ruler of an interstellar civilization. I watch everything," she said with a slight smile. "The question is what to do with what I've learned." Lyra leaned forward eagerly. "Mother, Jake's engineering expertise combined with my technical knowledge could solve the integration problems that have been limiting the Alliance. We could develop hybrid systems that could revolutionize interstellar cooperation." "Yes," the Queen finished. I'm aware of the potential applications. The question is whether Mr. Morrison is interested in a career change. A career change. Jake looked between mother and daughter, both of whom were regarding him with expressions of polite expectation. From maintenance engineering to what, exactly? Chief Human Liaison for Zephyrian Technology Integration, Queen Celestara said as casually as if she were offering him a sandwich. The position involves developing hybrid systems, training human technicians in bioelectric interfaces, and working closely with Lyrelay to establish standardized protocols for human Zephyrian technological cooperation. Jake's brain processed this information with the efficiency of a computer running underwater. You want me to work with Lyra? Among other things, the Queen said. The position also comes with diplomatic status, a substantial salary, and housing arrangements that don't involve sleeping on maintenance sector cots. But I don't know anything about diplomatic protocols or interstellar politics, Jake protested. Neither did I when I started, Queen Celestara replied. I learned. Besides, the most important qualification for this position is the ability to work with hybrid technologies, which you've already demonstrated. Lyra was practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. Jake, we could solve integration problems that have stumped our best engineers for years. Your human perspective on mechanical systems could revolutionize how we approach technological cooperation. And the Queen added with a meaningful look at her daughter. This arrangement would provide Lyrelay with a legitimate reason to postpone her marriage to Prince Valdrin indefinitely. Indefinitely, Jake caught the significant pause in her phrasing. Until such time as she chooses to pursue other arrangements, the Queen clarified. Zephyrian tradition requires that royal succession involve demonstrating independence and judgment. Lyrelay's escape yesterday, while dramatic, served as an excellent test of both qualities. Jake stared at her. You mean her running away was supposed to happen? Not specifically, the Queen admitted, but royal children are expected to challenge authority when they believe it conflicts with their judgment. Lyrelay's actions demonstrated both courage and strategic thinking. So I wasn't actually helping her escape, Jake said slowly. I was helping her pass some kind of test. You were helping her exercise her right to choose her own path, Queen Celestara corrected. The fact that her choice involves working with you suggests either excellent judgment or romantic attachment, possibly both. Lyra turned an interesting shade of purple. Mother. What? It's a reasonable observation, the Queen said innocently. Mr. Morrison, do you find my daughter's company agreeable? Jake looked at Lyra, who was studying her hands with intense fascination, and felt something shift in his chest. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been fixing atmospheric processors and avoiding diplomatic complications. Now he was being offered a chance to help bridge two civilizations while working alongside someone who made him laugh, even in the middle of an intergalactic incident. Your Majesty, he said carefully, if I take this position, what happens to Prince Valdrin and his trade agreements? Prince Valdrin will find another royal bride to bore with his economic forecasts, she replied dismissively. The Centauri Federation is far more interested in our technological cooperation than in arranged marriages. Your hybrid integration work will actually strengthen those relationships more effectively than a political union. And if I mess up spectacularly and accidentally start an interstellar war, then I'll have you transferred to a very remote outpost where you can contemplate your mistakes in peace, the Queen said cheerfully. But I don't think that's likely. You've already demonstrated remarkable adaptability under pressure. Jake looked around the room, taking in the floating displays, the adaptive furniture, and the casual discussion of interstellar politics that had somehow become his normal Tuesday morning. 6 months ago, the most exotic thing in his life had been a particularly stubborn gravity generator. Now he was being offered a chance to help reshape the relationship between two species. When do I start? He asked. Queen Celestara smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, Jake could see the family resemblance to her daughter. Immediately. Your first assignment is to work with Lyrelay to establish a joint human Zephyrian technical facility. I've already allocated space in the research sector. And housing arrangements, Lyra added hopefully. The diplomatic quarters are much more spacious than maintenance sector accommodations. Adjacent quarters, the Queen specified with a meaningful look at her daughter. Let's maintain some propriety while you two figure out whether this partnership is purely professional. Jake felt his face heat up again, but when he glanced at Lyra, she was grinning at him with an expression of pure mischief. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Mother's definition of propriety is quite flexible when it serves her diplomatic purposes." "I heard that," Queen Celestara said mildly. "Mr. Morrison, welcome to the Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps. Try not to electrocute yourself while learning to work with bioelectric interfaces." As they left the conference room an hour later, their arms full of technical manuals and diplomatic credentials, Jake found himself walking beside Lyra through corridors that no longer felt like foreign territory. She was explaining something about quantum resonance frequencies with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found an audience that wouldn't fall asleep during technical discussions. "The really exciting part," she was saying, "is that your atmospheric processor modifications yesterday demonstrated principles we've been trying to implement for years."